thank you for coming to this inaugural episode of this series. And the series is called Second Tuesday Webinars for Event Profs. And that's using the famous hashtag Event Profs. And the objective of this series is education, engagement, and as we move through episode to episode, we're going to do some testing to try to have the audience get involved in these webinars so that you can feel that you're a part of the event. Networking, for example, we'll have our LinkedIn group, which is also named after the series. Please look that up in LinkedIn, make a request to join, and you'll be part of this group. And then finally, with each episode, we'll bring awareness to event sustainability. And in each episode, we'll have a sustainability spotlight, recognizing an organization, a person, a movement that has made notable contributions to sustainability. And on that note, we recognize MPI Foundation, which is an entity of Meeting Professionals International. And the MPI Foundation is a not-for-profit organization that funds grants, scholarships, and industry research in support of the meeting and events industry. To support that theme, Blau Experiential Global Event Services will make a small donation to the MPI Foundation to support its efforts. And now, here we are. At this moment, today we perform the premiere episode, episode 1 of Nail-Biting Incidents, Event Managers Survived and Live to Tell. I'd like to introduce our moderator, someone who is known throughout the trade show and events industry. She is an accomplished veteran exhibit project manager and a trainer whose specialty is exhibit staff boothmanship. And there's some important numbers, and these are amazing numbers. With over 25 years of experience as a solopreneur, she has 7 industry certifications, has written over 400 articles on best practices published in Exhibitor Magazine and Exhibit City News, managed over 500 exhibits, and here's the big one. She's trained over 10,000 exhibit managers at the annual Exhibitor Live Conference and its regional training events, Fast Track. Now, most of us know her as the Booth Mom. I have the pleasure of knowing her as Candy, a wonderful person, very personable, very knowledgeable. Thank you for being here. Please welcome our very own Candy Adams. Candy, it's yours.
Thanks, Tay. The topic of your webinar is sort of near and dear to my heart because one of the first things I teach is plan on having a plan B or C or D, or that's why I say there's 26 letters in the alphabet, is because sometimes it seems like we need all of them. But my top surprises as an event manager were having a fire breakout under our corporate sponsor's car, a little guy named Mario Andretti. And we tried to toast his race car at one show. And then we burned down a hotel in Beijing when I worked for a little company called Intel. So like I say, I've had a few of these myself. But what I would like to do at this point is get on to our speakers today. And I have the pleasure of introducing somebody I've known through Exhibitor for many years, Kimberly Key. And she is a senior manager of event marketing for TeamViewer. And she's definitely a high energy marketing professional with decades of exhibitor leadership, experience in corporate events and trade show management. She also enjoys creating experiences that inspire, delight, and educate audiences. And if I can throw one in here, I still remember your bright orange booth, Kim, where you had shag carpeting and a hanging lamp, okay? Kimberly has managed programs for MCI, WorldCom, Hughes, Boeing, and Aero Electronics. At TeamViewer, Kimberly led the development of the company's inaugural partner summit, which surpassed both attendance and satisfaction goals. But I think we're going to hear that some of these things don't just pull off as planned. She's been on the speaking faculty of Exhibitor Conference for over 20 years, and she enjoys sharing her knowledge through both storytelling and her real life experiences. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Kim.
Thank you, Candy. And I'm definitely one of the tens of thousands of people that you have trained over the years. I remember attending my first exhibitor conference in 1999 and taking one of your classes. And I actually still quote some of the things that you've said in the sessions that I now teach. So thank you very much for all of your contributions to the industry over the years. So as Candy mentioned, I am the former senior manager of event marketing at TeamViewer. Unfortunately, was very recently a victim of layoffs. And so I'm now hashtag open to work. But the story that I'm going to tell today is something that took place while I worked at Jeppesen. Jeppesen is a technical division, a subsidiary of the Boeing Corporation. And the easiest way for me to put it is to say, where Boeing builds the airplanes, Jeppesen provides a lot of the technology that helps commercial aviation companies, commercial airlines manage things like crew schedules and fuel optimization and navigation, which is what Jeppesen is most known for. And when I worked at Jeppesen, I managed an event called Connect, and we had this large hosted customer conference called Connect Americas. And while the event was very successful, we had been asked to find ways that we could attract more of our Latin America customers to the event. And what we discovered is that a lot of the Latin America customers didn't necessarily want to attend the event in North America every year, but instead really saw a lot of value in us coming to them. So we decided to launch what we called the Connect LATAM Roadshow, Latin America Roadshow. And so we took the large Connect conference and did a smaller version of it and decided to do two one-day conferences, one in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and the other in Bogota, Colombia. And the pattern is that we would have a day for setup and rehearsals, a full day for the conference, which would start in the morning with breakfast and end in the evening with a happy hour, then a day of travel, setup, rehearsals, do it all over again in the next location. So we go to Sao Paulo, Brazil, and we execute this event. It was a success. Everything went off without a hitch. And that night at the reception, we started talking about the next day's travel plans to go to Bogota. And in the course of those conversations, it came up that we needed a yellow fever vaccination to get into Brazil. And I, being somebody who did lots of research into this prior to the event, said, well, I looked this up. And as an American going into Colombia, there are recommended vaccines, but no required vaccines. But what I failed to recognize is that we were Americans coming to Colombia, but we were traveling there from Brazil. And I think there are 2 or 3 countries where if you are traveling from that country into Colombia, that yellow fever vaccination is required. And you can't just have a picture of it or a digital record. You have to have the actual yellow card that they give you when you get vaccinated. So I was on an early morning flight with 3 other colleagues, and they called us the crash test dummies. Our job was to try and hack our way into Colombia without our yellow fever vaccinations. And while 2 of us managed to get through, 2 of us were detained. And by 2 of us, I mean me and 1 other guy. And they asked us for the vaccination cards, didn't have it. So they took us to a holding cell in the back of the airport where they detained us for about 2.5 hours. And during that time, they let us keep our phones. So we were in touch with colleagues back in the States, our travel department, everybody trying to do everything they could to figure out how they could get us out of detention and into Colombia to execute our event. In the meantime, we advised all the other travelers in our group to rebook their flights. So we had them book, for example, a flight on one airline into Houston and then book a flight back into Colombia on a second airline, because in some cases our attendees, our presenters were not allowed to board their flights to get into Colombia. So I like to joke to this day that I did hard time in a Colombia prison. Ultimately, the thing that got us out of detention was the fact that I had a suitcase full of Boeing swag. And that was something that ended up being very appealing to the officers that were detaining us. So the majority of us did end up making it into Bogota. The event went off without a hitch. It was a really great event. We had 3 people in our group who did not make it to Bogota. One of them was a presenter, and he did end up giving his session via WebEx. Luckily, all of our aviation customers were well aware of the requirements, and everybody had, a good laugh over it. But really, when it all came together, I'd never been so happy to see a group of people in my entire life. It was very stressful, very harrowing, and a mistake that I will never, ever make again.
Okay, Kim, I have to ask, what is the biggest mistake? And you had said when we talked, you and I had just talked about this earlier,
Mhm.
that the person you were with spoke the language, spoke Spanish,
Yes.
and that was a big help. So is that something you look to in the future, of having somebody on the team who can speak the language? And also, what would you do different about the timeline? Would you add another day between if you were doing international events, or?
I don't know that I would add another day in between. I'll answer that question first, simply because when you're doing a road show, the travel demand is already pretty high, right, for everybody. We were on the road for a week. Traveling from the States to Sao Paulo was in and of itself a 24-hour travel
Mhm.
experience. And then the trip from Sao Paulo to Bogota was another, I think, 6 or 7 hour flight. So I don't know that I would extend the timeline, but at Boeing, we had a really great travel department, and they actually flagged this in all of our travel documents. So it wasn't just me that missed it. It was every single person in our group. And it's simply because it was buried in the fine print in the bottom of our travel confirmations. So I think that it's just a really great reminder to always read the fine print. And I also think it's a good reminder not just to look at yourself as an American traveling into another country, but looking at the whole of your route and where it is that you're coming from and going to and what those requirements might be. I think it's not just a requirement from Brazil, but I think Panama was on the list. There were some other there, or maybe, yeah, I think Panama was on the list. So there were some other countries where this was a really strict requirement. We had a lot of bilingual people on our team, and I was very grateful to have been detained with one of those people. Um, Luckily, they let us keep our phones. I think had I not been with somebody who was bilingual, I would have relied a lot on Google Translate. But really, the most valuable weapon I had in my arsenal was my swag. Whoever would have known that all those logoed keychains and T-shirts and would have paid off in that way. It was literally my get out of jail free card.
Right. Well, thank you, Kim. And like I say, I think we've all learned a valuable lesson there. I didn't know it, that that it mattered where you were coming from, not where your country of origin was.
Exactly. Oh, by the way, the picture that's on screen is a picture from the Bogota event of our
I
team.
admire you for doing the international. It's not something that I enjoy. Too many variables. Okay, next I'd like to introduce Kyle Lang. And Kyle is the principal event planner and founder of Creative Consulting Partners. He's got over 25 years experience in hospitality, logistics, sponsorships, and team leadership. And he's created a not-for-profit fundraising program and unique festival experiences with audiences of up to 7,000 people. He served as a general manager over music festivals, including Harefest, which is the one he's going to be telling us about his glitch, 90s Final Fest and Wild Hair Music Festival, the first music festival to book country music sensation Zach Bryant as a headliner. And it won the Music Festival of the Year from the Oregon Festival and Events Association in 2022. So I now give you Kyle Lang.
Thank you, Candy. Appreciate you hosting and facilitating all of this for us. A little bit about background about my event. I'll be speaking about Harefest. It is an 80s rock and roll tribute band festival. My event's open to the public as opposed to bringing in professionals and more of a convention exhibit style. I am dealing with the general public at a ticketed event. This was year 11 that we were working on where my little snafu came up. And definitely threw me for a learning curve. This event started as a single day, 500-person event in its first year. And we've grown it and evolved it to a 5,000-person 3-day event hosted at the Clackamas County Fairgrounds in Canby, Oregon. A little bit about my story. So because we've grown from a smaller event to a bigger event, we have a lot of legacy volunteer groups who we utilize for festival functions. They've kind of always served those functions, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But this situation put us in a position where we actually had to take a look at how we use volunteers versus paid professionals. So Monday prior to festival opens on Thursday. I got thousands of people showing up, and not only do we have day visitors, but we also have overnight people who stay in RVs or tents on the property. We have something like, I believe it's almost 500 RVs and almost an equal number of tent campers that sleep and live on the property across these 3 days. So we have cars, we have RVs, we have rigs, all kinds of things coming in. And so the Monday prior to the festival, I hadn't heard from my traffic control volunteer group, which is the training organization for the county sheriffs. And they bring in their cadets and they teach them about traffic control, and we donate to their organization. And that's how we've managed traffic control in the past. Well, I hadn't heard from them. And so I give them a little buzz on Monday to check in, make sure about arrival times, make sure we're good to go. Where they then inform me that they do not have enough sheriffs to oversee the cadets, and therefore they're pulling out of the event. I have zero traffic control solution, basically. The reason this matters, where the Clackamas County Fairgrounds is positioned, is we are a couple 100 feet away from a major railroad crossing, and then literally probably 20 feet on the other side of that railroad crossing, I have a major 4-lane highway. We need to get people off of the highway, off of the railroad tracks, past where pedestrians are crossing from the parking area into the venue, and get everybody safely managed. Cars, pedestrians, there's a lot of moving parts. So here I am 3 days before the festival, and I have zero solution. And this is a liabilities scenario. This is a security scenario. I mean, there's just a lot of pieces that play into this. So I begin brainstorming, and I'm kind of reaching out to other volunteer groups, like the parking lot, the volunteer group that handles the parking lot. Well, will you handle traffic and parking? Through conversation, we realized nobody's trained to handle parking or traffic from their group. And these are like parents of high school age football players that handle parking. I don't know that I want to put them in the street with cars, with pedestrians. It's too complex. So basically the solution becomes apparent that we need to hire like a professional flagging company, like you would encounter at a road construction site or whatnot. I have two functions, right? As an event manager, control costs and increase customer experience, right? And so now these two things are in direct opposition to each other because the quotes that are coming in from the flagging companies are 10 times what we would have donated to the volunteer group. And so huge spike in expense. And so I go back to the festival owners and basically pitch, this is our solution. This is what we have to do. What wound up happening is this professional flagging organization showed up. They had stand lights, they had signage, like you wouldn't believe. The safety and the flow of traffic that then occurred across and over the course of the event was so much smoother, so much more navigatable by our attendees, that we quickly realized that sometimes you get what you pay for. And it's actually forced us to kind of take a look back at these legacy volunteer groups and take a look and ask the question, like, does it still make sense to have them serve this festival function in the current capacity, or can we make improvements? Yes, that cost money, but overall drive customer satisfaction, return visits, increase ticket sales, and safety. And we do live in the modern world where car ramming events and other things at public events like ours are a concern. I also have to get my traffic routes and my traffic patterns approved by the city of Canby's police force. And so to pull the traffic control people out of the equation was a no-go. I had to have that because this was approved by local law enforcement. So while it bumped our budget up, at the end of the day, we realized that volunteers are great, but volunteers are great in a limited capacity, and it's forcing us to kind of go through and look at our festival operations and take a look if it's time for us to upgrade to the professional level. So while it all worked out in the end, it was a nail-biting couple of days, really, because by the time you get the quotes in, review the quotes, are they available? Can they schedule staff to come and do the traffic control? It all eventually worked out in the end.
Kyle, how many people were on a traffic control team like you had to hire? And this was over how many days? And was it, split shifts when it was busy, or the bigger bands that were the draw? I mean, I look at this as a logistical nightmare.
Yeah. So, I mean, on the first day, we open at 6 p.m. and people are leaving around 1 a.m. Second day, they roll in at 3 p.m. or no, starting at noon, and we go to 1 a.m. And on Saturday, we start at 9 a.m. and we go to 1 a.m. These are very long days. So we're talking multiple shifts of people. I think there was 6 to 8 individuals kind of on the clock in the street controlling traffic at any given time. So, this traffic control company, this flagging agency, did a great job of sourcing personnel and getting boots on the ground and helping us keep our people safe.
So going forward, you are again rethinking the volunteer thing and thinking of staying with the flagging company because of the extra value it brought you?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no question as to how professional, how safe, there's no question to the value they brought to the event, and we're willing to pay the ticket price. Now we're also talking about just taking those volunteers and bringing them inside the festival and using them almost more in a customer service capacity and guest satisfaction capacity, which is really what they want to do anyways, right? They're volunteering, they want to interact with the people, and they're great ambassadors for us. So it's not necessarily about losing the volunteers, it's about pivoting them from roles that are guest facing or operational more into guest facing. They've been working the event for years. They know its history. They know how to talk about it. They know how to hype it up. So it's not about losing our volunteers. It's just about analyzing what functions they serve when they do arrive on the property.
Well, I admire you because that's a big undertaking, but it sounds like you've got it well under control and you've grown it every year for what, 11 years?
11 years. So this coming summer will be 12. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, thanks, Kyle, for sharing that. And like I say, break a leg on those upcoming events.
Thank you so much.
I'd now like to introduce Al Mercuro, the Senior Account Executive from Genesis Exhibitions, with his story. With over 30 years in trade show and marketing industry, Al brings not only a wide range of experience, but also an intuitive ability to match unique client needs to innovative solutions for both live and hybrid virtual events. His portfolio showcases a spectrum of work he's produced to help clients move into new markets, mobile marketing, mall tours, and highly visible productions. A soccer game at the UN, the Elmo Roadshow, and the Super Bowl. He's got a passion for educating his clients and inspires them on how to produce events that are sustainable. And truthfully, that's how I met Al during COVID, that we hooked up talking about sustainability online. So let's all welcome Al and go ahead and tell us what you encountered.
Okay, thank you, Candy. Well, in 1998, a client approached us about doing a special event. I think we're all familiar with trade shows being at convention halls like the Javits Center and McCormick Center and hotel conferences and things like that. But this was a trade show planned to be on the QE2 ocean liner and not just docked on a pier. It was going to go out to the middle of the ocean for 3 days and have about 62 exhibitors and about 300 attendees on board. So it was a very boutique kind of show, and they would do about 2 of these events during the week that the QE2 was in New York City between getting back to the UK from coming to New York. So there was this downtime that they were able to use the ship in this capacity, to make use of it and get it out to sea. And it was this very successful. We started in 1998 with them and did a number of them during the year. And a lot of the same exhibitors would come back. They found it very, very successful for them to come back as an exhibitor. And the exhibitors paid for all the attendees to be on board the ship. So it was no cost to these marketing directors and various different people like that to attend the show. And because you're on board a ship in the middle of the ocean, you have to meet everyone that's on board for the event. You have set meetings, so to speak, to meet every attendee on board the ship. So, and plus at night they have parties, gambling, whatever, dinners. The picture you see here is the first night that we were there, and they forced us to wear tuxedos, including my crew, to go to dinner. And they learned the American market after this first night was not really used to having tuxedos and going to dinner this way. So they abandoned that idea after the first night. But our crew was so busy, we didn't have time to even get changed for the next night. We just had to do so much work during the night to get ready for the next morning. So this was just for the first night that went on board. We did this event up until 2001, and the ship was out to sea the second week of September of 2001. And when 9/11 happened, the ship was due back into New York Harbor on 9/12. The harbor was closed, so there was no way to get the boat back into New York. So the boat was going to be rerouted to Boston. And having seen the first plane hit the building that morning, walking to work, my mind not necessarily was on the fact that we have a boat out at sea at that point. It was more or less just dealing with the shock of what was going on in New York at the time. But then you have to kind of take that aside and kind of put your feelings aside and kind of say, hey, we have work to do here. And we have to figure out what we're going to do about getting these attendees back and the exhibitors back and my crew back from Boston. So we sat with the client and had a quick phone call. We came up with a game plan to send trucks and buses up to Boston to retrieve everyone and bring them back to New York. But the key takeaway from this was you don't often plan for something like this to happen, I guess, but you just have to figure out what you're going to do when it does happen. And it was a valuable lesson to learn from that. But as professionals, you kind of have to, like I said, put your personal feelings aside and just deal with the issues at hand and try to come up with a solution, like you said, plan B or C, or how many letters it takes to do that.
So Al, with everything that was going on with 911, and I was thinking back to the communication between you and your staff on board, and then everything going on. I mean, I know you live in the New York area, correct?
Yep. Yep.
So it was closer to you than to a lot of us. What was your biggest challenge? Because I mean, I swear I still had a Nextel phone, so I wouldn't have had any video. I think you'd mentioned at one point that there was limited communication for people on the boat of knowing what was going on while it was out there.
Correct. So actually, one of the things they enforced on the ship was the fact that it was at a point in the ocean where you couldn't use a cell phone anyway, and if anybody had a TV in the room, they shut off all the TVs because they wanted everyone to be part of the events that were going on during the day. They didn't want to be distracted by anything. So my only remembrance of that would be the fact that there was a land boat communication with the boat itself, and that's how the communication got to them about obviously what's happened in New York that day, but at the same token of what they were planning to do to get the boat rerouted up to Boston. So I can only imagine what everyone was thinking on board the ship, not really knowing the news of what was going on that day, and just hearing whatever they just were told. But I can't imagine what that must have been like.
Amazing. Well, thanks, Al, for sharing that story. And like I say, I know it, was both a professional and a personal thing for you, because I know that you did have a client who you said was doing a trade show that day and was lost.
Yeah, we actually we delivered a new exhibit for them to the World Trade Center on 9/10 for her event, which was 9 o'clock that morning at the Windows of the World restaurant, which is at the very top of the World Trade Center, and that's where she was on 9/11 because that's when the show opened, was 9/11 at 9 o'clock. So I know where she was, and unfortunately she didn't make it, back. She didn't work in the building. She was going there for her company's trade show, and so she was unfortunately the wrong place at the wrong time.
Well, thanks for sharing, and I'll turn it back over to Tay.
So very fascinating stories, very interesting, and if anything, a great learning experience for all of us to live vicariously through all of the work that you've done. So thank you very much. And then, please, if you enjoyed this episode, please sign up and register for episode 2, which is going to be on Tuesday, October 10th, titled Masters of Experiential Engagement: How Illusions and Lego Bricks Affect Change.